Hey guys, Deli here from Team Wnax, and today I wanted to go over a tier list all the road decks that have tops in the current format, and kind of place them where I think they belong. If you're looking, pretty much all these decks are budget too, so something like a budget road tier list. I'm gonna give you guys kind of some options to look at for decks that have been doing well, and then if you guys want deck lists or deck profiles for any of these decks, just let me know. I've actually played most of these for the most part, and I like most of them. So yeah, let's go into it. To start off with, we'll lead with Trap Tricks. So I think Trap Tricks is like a decent choice. It has some good matchups. It has quite a few tops, surprisingly. That might just be due to like the volume of people playing the deck, though. I don't know if that actually has anything to do with the deck itself being good. But Trap Tricks is one of like the few like truly budget decks you can play right now. In terms of like, you can crack 3 structure decks and spend about $50 on the extra deck and like some of the main deck staples, and you'll essentially be done, especially with like a lot of the new cards in the new anniversary collection being really cheap. Those are really all Trap Tricks needed to play. It can play Thrust. It's not necessary though. It's just nice for them. Prosperity getting reprinted was one of the more expensive cards in the deck, and that's no longer available. However, I do think the deck is kind of flawed. I've played it a little bit. It does feel kind of underwhelming going second specifically, and if your opponent can put up multiple interactions, it really sucks to play against it. Also, if your opponent's deck isn't that bad against trap holes, yeah. So if your opponent's deck is just like good against trap holes, it doesn't even matter. You're just gonna lose. After that, we have Dark World. I actually think Dark World is a really good deck. The problem with it obviously is that Shifter and Droll are still popular cards, and this deck just loses. And then Bystials are also fairly popular, and that can be hard to play against. I also think it has a pretty terrible tier matchup, and going second into a lot of decks, it can struggle. However, it is still a really, really powerful deck, and in the hands of a competent player, can do a lot of stuff. Plunder, I mean, this is kind of an easy choice, right? Plunder is a budget deck, kind of road, but still just like a nasty deck. However, I do think like if you're a newer player, I think Flunder is great because you don't really need to be that good to play Flunder. You can kind of cheese wins off it no matter what, and it still will just perform some days. Some days it won't. If you're just trying to like go to locals and be like consistent and do well, I would say probably not Flunder. But if you're trying to go to an event and just like top it, I think Flunder is insane. I think Flunder is really good for like topping events. Probably not winning events so much, but just for like if you're going to an event and you're like an average player and you want the best odds of doing well, I think Flunder is like a great choice. Next, we have the Joshua Schmidt deck, Mathmech. Mathmech is, I think, surprisingly really good. Whenever I play against Mathmech, I'm genuinely scared whenever they win the die roll, because the end board on that deck is just like good enough to beat every deck, very punishing into a lot of decks, and it generates so much advantage that by the time you're like actually like kind of able to like crack through the board, they probably won. The only problem with Mathmech is that it's semi-inconsistent. You're forced to run cards like Sign It Mining, Small World, which are both -1s, which does feel bad. The deck can make up for it to some extent. However, it is still fragile to cards like Droll, and it's still fragile to like hand traps like Ash and stuff. So it can to an extent fall apart. The Bystials also obviously still destroy that deck. So I think it's hit or miss. I think if you have a good day with Mathmech, you can definitely top an event. For locals, I think the deck is perfectly fine. Honestly, I think like you can beat good players with it. You can beat top tier decks that can like semi-consistently if you play well. However, it is going to be a little bit more die roll than some other deck choices. After that, we have Plunder Patrol. Plunder Patrol also for me is going to fall in decent. I think Plunder is pretty hard to play. If you're looking for a deck that's gonna like challenge you, Plunder is definitely one of them. It plays really okay going second or first. If you combine it with Runic, it plays really well. However, time rolls are gonna fuck you up. And I think like just Plunder Adventure is a really good deck that's just hard to play, so it doesn't see as many results as it should. However, the deck is dirt cheap. You can get a Plunder core for like $20 maybe. It's probably less than that. It's a really nice choice if you want a cheap deck that you can really improve on while you play, and I think you'll see results from it. Probably don't. Sky Striker. Sky Strikers, I probably don't. I think Sky Striker has a lot of really bad matchups this format. I think it's really lackluster overall. One of the better Sky Striker players I know, Brian Tolino, Brian John, some people might know him. He even struggles with Sky Striker at times, like just like winning matches. The deck just doesn't do enough anymore. And it's also fragile to a lot of interruption and removal. Runic, I think Runic's insane, but you have to be a time wizard to play it. I think if you can, if you're good at managing your time, I'm not. because I play really fast. This deck doesn't let you play really fast because you have to skip turns and stuff. But if you can play really fast, if you can be clear and concise, and you don't mind stunning people in time, it's pretty good. Keck W Altergeist. So I know this might get some hate. I don't believe in Geist. I think that deck is pretty darbo. I've lost to it. I will say that. If it goes first and you don't open enough disruption, its end board is very hard to break. But it plays a lot of Garnets. It's really bad at going second. And it's just kind of a mediocre deck overall. If you have enough gas, you can definitely go through it too. If you're like going into like big combo with Geist, you're probably gonna lose. If you're going into like mid-range and you win the die roll, you probably win. I can see it having like a pretty good Restorace matchup. But I imagine Tier is just dreadful. I imagine Tier and Pearly are dreadful matchups to play, so I would say take that. You're basically playing a combo trap deck, which that's kind of what it's like a worse version. It's like a lot worse version of Lab because it can't play on the opponent's turn one like Lab can. Keck W Ninjas. This doesn't have any tops. I just really like ninjas. Not this ninja per se. But I'd go to high school with his wife, which is kind of cool, I guess. I'm still friends with her on Facebook, I think. And ninjas is one of my favorite decks in terms of actual play. If you want a really, really fun budget road deck to play at locals, the most expensive card in the deck is Prosperity. The rest of it is dirt cheap, and I think like ninjas are okay. They take a lot of skill for not a lot of reward, which is why we don't really see much play of it, but I can definitely see why a player like Jessica Cotton will enjoy it. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with ninja. Even if it's not the best, you can really play the game. Marine Cess right now, I think Marine Cess is like an okay deck. It has some tops. However, I think right now the power level for the deck is just a little too low. It doesn't generate enough advantage to keep up with other mid-range decks. Even Salad is outperforming it. However, Marine Cess, if you want a pretty decent deck that you can really show skill expression on, kind of like where Plunder's at, Marine Cess has a lot of effects. It can do a lot of stuff. There's a lot of skill. There's like a high skill ceiling to it. The problem is the deck itself doesn't really have a high ceiling. There's only so much you can do with Marine Cess. There's only such a big board you can end on. It's a lot about just like managing your resources and learning to trade properly, which it can be helpful for some people. But I don't think the deck right now matches up well into the meta. After that, we have Evil Eye. This actually has a couple tops. This deck is pretty cheap from what I recall. I think like if you want to buy like the expensive stuff, you can. I don't know enough about this deck to really place it. However, I've played it a little bit. I would say probably don't. With the time rules, it's hard. And there's like natural outs and decks to kind of the Surzeal board, but it is not a terrible deck overall. Exo Sister, I think this deck's insane. If you get nibbed, it really sucks. If you get debarred, it really sucks. If you get eclipsed, it really sucks. However, a lot of those cards aren't super in the format. Super Poly is probably the bane of your existence. However, post-side anti-spell is really good. Prosperity is really cheap now, and then other than Magnifica, your most expensive card in your deck is probably like a $4 packs. I think Magnifica's like 15 right now. The rest is dirt. The rest with the tin reprints is super cheap. I think this is a good deck to pick up. It can definitely get support in the future. And I do think this deck, when played well, is nasty to play against. It does a lot for very little, and it gets a lot of pluses while doing it. Really solid deck. And also gets to play Shifter, which is nice. Stair Claw, I think Stair Claw is probably just flat out one of the best like road decks you can play, although I might be a little biased. Stair Claw is really good. If you can play this deck well, this deck does a lot for very little. It puts up solid end boards. It has access to Baron consistently, which was like the most expensive card now before in it, which is dirt cheap now. And you're really looking at like Vicious Astrolot and Visa Samsara as being the only expensive cards you have to play in the deck. I think Visa Samsara is down to like $10, and you can get away with one Vicious Astrolot if you're not playing like a super combo heavy variant. This is one I can definitely do dark profile on. I have playtested this one. If you go back into my live matches, I actually played a Stair Claw combo like Bestial deck on our team 3v3 we did, and I swept it with Stair Claw. Stair Claw is nasty. If you play this deck well, it feels really good. Sword Soul, I think Sword Soul is decent right now. I don't think Sword Soul is one of those decks that'll ever be bad. When we get to a point where Chizhao Blackout Baron is a bad board, we've gone too far. Probably don't Punk. As much as I love Punk, it's one of my favorite decks. It has a bad tier matchup. It has a bad Restorace matchup. Not unwinnable, but if you lose the die roll, it's going to be really hard. This also includes the Gold Pred variant of the deck. The Gold Pred variant's the one that topped, but regardless, I do think this deck is still okay. I think with like these other decks, it's not the right format for it. Some of the matchups are really hard for it. But once we get to a format where there's not as many hand traps in the format, And like there's not as many powerful one card combo decks. I think this deck will be better. But yeah, all these decks besides Ninjas have a top this format, at least at a regional top 8 level. And I actually think all of these decks are pretty okay. None of them are super expensive. I think you're capping at like 100 almost all these decks outside of playing cards like Thrust. And maybe if you want to run Dispatter and Stair Claw, which you can, I guess. None of these decks are going to run you too much money. Like I said, if you guys want deck lists for any of these, or like specifically budget deck lists for any of these decks, let me know. I have a lot of decks, and because I have a lot of decks, I try not to spend a ton of money on all the decks I play. So I try to keep a lot of the budget choices. So I kind of just have all these decks. I don't think there's like a couple I don't like. I don't have Mathmech. I don't have Plunder. I don't have Dark World. I don't have Evil Eye or Altergeist, but like I have a lot of these decks and I've played a lot of them for fun here and there. So if you guys want to see deck profiles for all of these, definitely hit the like and subscribe button, and just let me know in the comments which ones you want me to do a deck profile on. I can run some matches kind of, or even just do some combos for everyone. Just like I said, I've played all these decks quite a bit. I play a lot on DB. I play a lot on Yugioh Omega. So yeah, just let me know. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later. Bye.